Welcome back to This Is Working. I'm Dan Roth, editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. On this show, we talk to leaders who have a significant impact on society and the way we live and work now. This week, we're talking about leading through challenging times. Today, my guest is Ginny Rometty. Former IBM CEO Ginny Rometty believes the role of a leader is to define reality and give hope. Two tasks seemingly at odds in times of economic uncertainty. But in her nearly 4 decades working at IBM, she learned how to achieve that in even the most challenging times. Rometty gained experience as a systems engineer, consultant, and general manager, working her way up to become CEO, a first for the 100-year-old company that never had a woman at the helm. She earned an array of accolades and awards along the way, including Bloomberg's 50 most influential people in the world and Time's 20 most important people in tech. As CEO, she led the company's transformation, building a $25 billion hybrid cloud business and shifting the company's strategy to focus on new technologies, AI, cognitive computing, blockchain, and cybersecurity. In difficult moments throughout her career, Rometty learned to lead through the lens of what she calls good power. In her new book on the topic, she shares ideas of how we can all drive meaningful change, something she hopes will inspire others to make a positive impact on the world. Ginny, welcome to This Is Working.
Thank you, Dan. I'm so happy to be here.
It is great to have you here, and I've been loving reading your pieces on LinkedIn and seeing you talking to the community. It's great to see.
It's a wonderful platform.
Great. Love your book. Thought it was terrific. One of the things that you talk about is a theme throughout the book, and is a theme of This Is Working, this cycle, is leading during challenging times. Your upbringing is essentially that, leading through challenging times. I was wondering if you could describe a little bit about growing up.
Yeah. I actually, as I looked back and as I started to write the book, I was raised by really strong women, but they all had a tragedy in their life. And as you read, my great-grandma was the last person alive in her family that came to America from Belarus. She worked cleaning toilets in the Wrigley building, third shift, put every dime she made into U.S. savings bonds that people don't talk about anymore, and that would one day save us from losing our house. My grandma lost 2 husbands. She would have to make lampshades for a living. And then probably what sticks out, but it's not why I write about it to be a tragedy, my dad abandoned our family when I was 16, but my mom was only 34 years old. She had 4 kids, never worked a day in her life outside the home, did not have a college degree. I mean, it was a kid raising kids.
Right.
But I say out of that, I write about it. Took me, a lot to be vulnerable to write about it. And I wanted to be sure my brothers and sisters were okay if I wrote about it. The reason I do is it's not like because my mom was a victim or to talk about, oh, geez, wasn't this a rough, thing? It was really what we learned from how they reacted to tragedy. So my grandmas and my great-grandma taught us like, hey, hard work, there is always a way out of things. I mean, it's kind of corny, but that's what I witnessed, right? They're like, no, just work harder. And my mom, I think the biggest thing we all took away, she said, never said it actually, we witnessed it. She's like, no one's going to define me. No one, only I will. Because she went and got a little bit of school, got a little job, got a little more school, a little better job. And it sort of taught all of us that, okay, no one will ever define us and only we will define who we are. And you referenced my career in IBM. I mean, I would find how true that would be for a company. If you don't define it, somebody else will define it. True for a country too. But that big thing about don't ever let anyone else define who you are is what I took away from my childhood.
And you had all of you have 3 siblings.
I do.
All of them went on to do really incredible things.
Great things. My mom always goes, what did I do? And it's kind of like a funny thing because we're like, you did everything. She doesn't understand it. And I not tongue in cheek, say my other 3 siblings are more talented and more successful. 2 others are CEOs, and the other one was CEO of a very large piece of a big company. So they have all gone on. And I do talk about what they all learned from that situation in the book.
Do you think that, is it the kind of thing where you think that being challenged and being raised that way is part of what leads to success? Are you a special case? What should people take away from that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Do you think you have to have experienced something like that? You're very successful.
I don't think so, but I think it makes people, it seems like it hardens people and makes them, if it's the right kind of person, do great things. But you tell me.
Yeah, well, I've been kind of like anecdotally surveying on this topic as I go around. I get kind of 50-50. And what I do have, I had a nice conversation with Brene Brown on it. She said, I think you have to have some kind of adversity of some kind, and actually a little worried that why don't we let our kids even have stew in things a little bit longer to build it. And so I think the part of the book though is, I think everybody has the power to make some choices. And that's really what I want people to take. It's kind of what got me to write the book in the power of me, we, and us in 3 pieces. Because I really think how you lead, that's a lot of what the podcast is here, has a lot to do with what you've experienced. Like I always say, close your eyes and think about your child. Who do you see when you close your eyes? And I actually think all of us have the power to make some change. And that's what I hope I give confidence to people to do.
Well, it's not, as you talk about your rise through from Glen Ellen into college and Northwestern to GM to IBM, along the way, there have been mentors who have found you and have either wanted to sponsor you, or as you talk about later from different contexts of someone saying, I want to stay in Ginny's light. What do you think it is that has made people want to get behind you and help push you to the next level?
Yeah. Well, first off, I think, and you talk about this a lot, I think there's this idea that people are like, well, I need a sponsor, I need a mentor. I never really thought about that. And I think what did it was, I always approached everyone with, what could I learn from you? Like today, I was like, what can I learn from Dan? And I think when people feel that from you, they actually want to help. And so like over life, you just kind of accumulate. And I always say to people, hey, look, I'm a mosaic of the best of everything I saw. Because I was this idea of ask more questions than you answer, which can be hard sometimes. But in this idea of like, if I really listen to you to learn, I mean, have you ever been at a party and you're talking to someone and you're watching them look over your shoulder? I mean, maybe it doesn't happen to you, but I'm kind of like, God, is there someone like so much more interesting coming? And it's that idea that like, in those moments, and that's what I think did it. And I also think it's something that in this country, everywhere, realize, like all those people realized, it was like little things they did. Teachers who stayed after to help you. A teacher who said, you know what, I know you can't afford this. Apply for this scholarship. I mean, I was in Northwestern and killing myself with loans and aid. And a professor said, you know, there's this scholarship with General Motors. I really think, I wouldn't have even known about it, right? I think you should apply. So when people do little things that you don't think matters, I think I'm a accumulation of all those things that some little thing they did. One of my neighbors you write about wrote me a note last night. She said, no, we did nothing that was different than what ordinary people would do. But that's what mattered. And I think we should all remember that all those little things we do for someone matters.
So is the advice then is to be so curious or to be so locked in on people that people want to help you out? I mean, people don't do this for everybody.
No, I think, again, back to this point, do they do it for everybody? I think it's that you think about what you give before you think about what you get. And if you do, I think you build a network of support around you. I got taught that so early in business that I was there, it's kind of a first principle I write about in the book, if you don't mind me saying it. It's like to be in service of something, not serve it. So if you're in service of something, like you go out for dinner, if the waiter's in service of me, he doesn't care just to deliver me my food. He cares I had a great evening. So I was taught, trust that first, and then in the end, it will return to you. Now, people may say that's naive. I found it in the arc, not naive. I found it to be accurate, that if I provided value, and that was my first thought, in the end, I could make my quota or whatever it was I was doing, my product better, at the time. And to me, it's like a really important thought. Really register, what are you in service of? And you can see the difference in a doctor. You think in your own life, your doctor, the ones who are like, hey, I just had my knee replaced. Hey, it works. I mean, the x-rays are fine. I'm like, yeah, but it hurts.
Right.
The guy who really cares I can walk again is in service of. The guy who tells me he did hey, x-rays look fine is not.
One of the things you talk about in the book that I love was that anytime earlier in your career, anytime anyone asked you to help, you said yes.
Yes.
If it meant getting on a plane to go talk to a customer.
I was taught that. I was taught that by someone.
What were you taught?
He said to me, when people ask for help, you give them help, because the day you need it, they will be there. And it just turned out that really did turn out to be true. And so I'm trying to, like I say, this is instinctive in me, and maybe you can tell it as I'm trying to teach, like, could I be vulnerable and tell lessons and some of it's foundational, right? It's kind of when you're younger, that's what you're talking about, that those basics you learned about, be super curious, listen to learn, anybody you work with, that time's the most valuable thing they give you, so you better give something in return. And it's kind of habits I tried to write about that were just taught to me over time that I think yielded what you then said. You kind of end up with being in service of people, and in return, your goals get fulfilled.
Yeah, I found myself while I was reading your book. I drive my wife crazy when I read these books before guests come on, because I'm quoting nonstop. I'm like, hey, did you guys know this and this? And one of the interesting parts about your book is so many of the quotes come from other people you've learned from. It is not your own language. Often is saying, I learned this from Ken Chenault. I learned this from this leader.
Yeah, I don't steal them. I give them attribution.
No, it's all credit.
For sure.
It's all credit. But you are a collector of insights from other people as well that you then filter through your own eyes.
Yes, that's a funny one. Ken Chenault, this is who I learned. Paint reality and give hope. I think it's one of the greatest lessons. And I would always say it was Ken Chenault. And then one day I look online and I'm like, oh, it's Napoleon. I had to tell Ken, I said, Ken, we got to give Napoleon credit for this thing.
Oh, he didn't get that. Can you talk about, that's a really important point though. Why did that resonate with you so much? And talk a little bit about that phrase.
If I might, that to me, especially in these times now, when times are rough, and I have had lots of rough times and hard things to lead through, and people say, how do you do it? And I learned this point about paint reality, give hope means this is not about rah, rah. Yes, we can do it. We can do it. Like I was integrating 2 big companies during a downturn. And it was this time I had moved off of engineering and into consulting. And, when times get a little tough out there, some of the first things that go are discretionary spending in consulting, right? You would probably agree with me, right? What can we cut? Things fast. And so it got hard to make targets and doing an integration at the same time. And I always remember it isn't like, no, come on, we can do it, work harder. It's about paint reality of where it's at, right? Be honest with people about, okay, guys, this is what the environment looks like. Here's where we're doing well, here's where we're not. But then you always got to flip to this, okay, but now let me tell you why you're going to come out the other end of this, okay, and you will be able to do this. And that idea is another way, I guess, of saying appeal to your head and your heart at the same time. And I think it's just like such an important part during difficult times. Like, don't try to sugarcoat things and act like it's not tough out there. Or don't try to say, no, I'm sorry, some people might lose their jobs. They might. I mean, be honest. You do it the most humane way you can. These are tough decisions that get taken, but then it's always about a way forward. That is, to me, what paint reality and give hope is.
I want to give some hellos here, people on the stream. You have people from around the world. Emerson from Brazil is joining. Paula from Mexico. John Paul from Canada.
Some of my favorite countries.
Yeah, great. Some good comments coming in. Michael says he loves your definition of leadership, and members are resonating with the idea to keep learning from those around you. This is a good question coming in from Hassan. Let's bring this in. He said, I'd like to know, what is your advice to manage the managers?
Oh, isn't that interesting? To manage the managers.
What do you tell managers?
You know what, it's funny, I talked to a group yesterday and I was saying, it was made me think again, what did I learn so early on about this? I said, when I was a manager, one of the very first things I was taught 2 things. First was how I'd really be evaluated is how well my people developed. And I, again, think during these times, this is a really important point. Sit there and say, how much do I do to make sure every one of them is better than they were when they started working for me? It's not about you. And this is, to me, like a really big part of the book when I say, you some part in time transition from yourself and caring about yourself to caring about other people at work. And it, like the power of us. I got completely evaluated on their skills, not mine. And that's a very interesting, so what I would tell managers, that. The other thing I would tell managers, I say, again, in difficult times, do not forget that decisions should be made based on values. I had very early on, a man worked for me, superstar technician. And he started telling really bad jokes that would today be unacceptable today, unacceptable then. But he was great. And I went to the person I work for and I said, I'm starting to hear this is happening. He said, Ginny, this is unequivocal. Fire him. You tell him it stops immediately or he's fired. He's like, you got to learn. There are things. These are value-based decisions that in life will be full of them. And I think in these times, making value-based decisions, is a really important thing. You think about when a product goes out, and we can talk about ChatGPT, we could talk about a lot of things, and to make those decisions with values. And in tough times, I think that's because trust becomes a premium, everything that goes around.
But if you work at a company where making quota is the most important thing, and the manager says, I want to make a decision based on values, and the company says, it's going to have an impact on your earnings, what would you say?
I'd let it have an impact on the earnings.
Mhm.
I really would. I think because if you've been in and you've been in a company that's been around pretty, good period of time now, I
LinkedIn?
think would agree with me.
20 years.
Would you? Yeah, that's, I mean,
Yeah, that's
okay, you're starting to reach adolescence there, right? In the time.
That's right. It's not an IBM.
So
We're
for
a
a company
baby
that's 100,
compared to
I
IBM.
know, to 113 years, so I've taught you as an elder, in many ways. I think that point is that I really believe this strongly. I see the difference of how people react to issues in the market right now, younger companies that haven't had time to like grow deeply rooted values, because I always say, hey, your actions speak louder than your words. Okay. So you need to have people act consistent with those things. And so, yeah, I would say that would be an easy call for me. You too, I think.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. I want to ask you about an anecdote in the book that I found particularly insightful from your time as CEO. You had to make a lot of hard decisions at IBM. IBM was, as you say, a company that had been around for a long time. The market was changing. You had to make some very difficult decisions, one of which was taking IBM out of the semiconductor manufacturing business, selling your fabs. In the book, you talk about bringing on two, I think these were pretty big supporters of the integrated semiconductor business.
Absolutely.
John Kelly and Arvind Krishnan went on to be CEO.
John was the father of it. Yeah.
So what was the thinking? Now you had if I read this right, you knew you wanted to be out of the fab business.
I knew I couldn't afford to be in it, but go on. Yes, but
you brought in these two people who were supporters and said to them, you guys work it out. What was the thinking behind bringing in someone who didn't necessarily agree with your thinking and asking them to lead this entire decision?
This is really like the whole book. I try to tell stories that are instructive for people, right? Because one of the biggest things about having good power is like embrace tensions. And sometimes tensions mean there's X or Y are neither good choices. And you got to like sit in a really uncomfortable spot to figure out the third way through. And that's why I tell that story, because IBM was one of really the big originals, big semiconductor manufacturer. And we had research, development, manufacturing. So anybody listening that does all three of those knows they were tightly integrated together. So said differently, what you're doing in manufacturing, you could fix things you didn't like happening back here.
Right.
Okay, great when you have control of the whole process, right? And we do high-end chips. So, okay, but now here's the world back in 2012 when I step in. Okay, cloud, AI, data, mobility, social, all these are swirling at a rate. We had done well in the past era, but we weren't positioned for the future. And I looked at what I had to invest in. And here we are now getting ready for another era of chips to go to the next, whether it was 7 nanometer, 2 nanometer, a fab, 10 to 20 billion a fab. Okay, where do I get this money to it? But I got to invest in cloud and AI. So I said to the guys, John was a father, but what they did, I said, look, on one hand, shareholders would love me. Get out of this. It's costing us a ton of money. On the other hand, back to values, I got customers, they trust really important stuff to the hardware that we make that run these chips. They can't go away. I mean, I can't even imagine doing it, right? So I got two bad answers here. I'm going to upset the customer. I'm going to upset the shareholder and stay in it. And I said, guys, we've got to find a way through. And they did. And what we eventually did, it's going to sound obvious now in retrospect, but you're right, strong proponents of how it was done. And they said, we eventually had to redo the research and development so that you could separate it, obviously, and have a contract manufacturing partner and find one politically correct. Because what the country needed, which we could talk about all, was we need our R&D in these high-tech products to stay. And now I knew I had a national gem in that. I had to keep it. So that to me, the reason to tell a story is like I think it's a great example of how to embrace tension, because we all have it now. And I don't care what your job is, right? And I often found that idea of like run to conflict. Most people are like, no, let me delegate conflict. I started to like it because I always knew something better was going to come. Even an upset customer, if you're like, I don't want to call them. I'm like, no, I will actually like to call them, because honestly, I'll get to the bottom of what it really is. And usually you can actually fix what it really is, and I think like in tough times that happens right now. Like people are like, hey, cut your prices. And if you really get into what they don't like, well, they probably don't like the value they're getting. And so fix it, So anyways,
well, yeah, you say the conflict often, I can't remember what the exact line is, but conflict often creates better outcomes than
I almost feel that way 95% of the time. Actually, I've come to.
So you encourage these guys to basically like go argue this out.
I do.
Yeah.
And they did, by
And
the
then
way.
do they become better leaders because of that? Because
I
they
think
had to convince
much better
themselves
leaders
of it?
and the people around. And that process, I think everybody feels this. When you are part of it, you buy in then to the
Right.
answer, right? So now this isn't a matter of, I'm telling you to do something you all hate. Everyone bought in and saw the way forward, and because these were great people.
Great. Let me give some more shout outs here. We've got Hasib from Pakistan, Dawn from New Jersey, Ali from Dubai. A comment here. Cheryl says, I love to hear conversations like this and learning what great leaders have done to empower others. Divya says, they are excited to read your book. Joe says they love how you embody thought leadership. Let's talk a little bit about your time as CEO. You were a CEO during a time of rapid growth for the tech industry. And there were companies that were doing phenomenally well and were sucking up talent at a time where you were making hard decisions about what to cut and cutting revenue. The company was smaller when you left than it was.
Oh yeah, I divested a lot.
Right. How did you lead? And there are times where leaders are leading when there is a national crisis. The pandemic is a good example of that. Everyone was solving, had the same issues they were running into. You were the opposite. You were trying to lead a company where there were other people could look out there across the street and say, I could go work for this other company that will give me RSUs and I could do the work there and I could play ping pong all day. How do you lead at a time where there are differences in the marketplace, and how do you convince employees to stay?
Yeah, a superb question, because we're going to enter that phase, I think, for a lot of companies
with
right
AI,
now. Right, it's happening right now,
exactly.
right? Yeah, and because I had to recognize we were in a different spot, right? We had to rebuild a foundation for the future, where these guys were going like this, and in the marketplace applauded growth, and here at the same time, we had to change the whole portfolio, right? And so the big thing I had to learn to focus. I will tell you, I didn't start there, and I'll come back to it, because the first things I focused on was the market's going so fast. Come on, we got to go faster, faster, faster. I learned a really valuable lesson, and I apologized to the workforce many times, because I'd be like, she's just telling us to go faster and faster. And I learned a lesson, which was, you know what? That's like telling you to run a marathon with hiking boots on. If I, as leadership, don't do something to help you move faster, this is not a fair deal. So it took us down a path of, ironically, how we work, which is a big theme of the book, which is sometimes how you work just might be more important than what you do. Agile, design teams, co-creation. I mean, we went through, because I had to really change the way everybody worked en masse, hundreds of thousands of people. So we talked a lot about, this is what we have to do. I mean, it's a world of consumerism, speed, all right? Even though we make enterprise products, people come to work and they expect those things to work just as nice and lovely and everything else. So it was everything from net promoter score to going from no design, well, I shouldn't say no, we had small number of designers to tens of thousands, right? And training 100,000 people. So one is you focus on where you have to go with people, right? So this was this idea of how you do may be more important than what you do. But the other thing that was at the core of it, how do you keep people? It was really appealing to, what makes you you? Like, I had to go back to what was the purpose of the company. And we all settled on a phrase, be essential. I mean, look, we had sold everything that consumers would touch, right? The PCs, the cash registers, they were gone. So now what IBM does is below the surface, right? Then what your kids will see as a consumer. And so it was, we do mission critical work, and we got, be really proud of it. We have to help our clients do that better, help them move to the cloud, et cetera. It's what finally found our way from not being just a public cloud, but we were the hybrid cloud guy. We really understood how they had to go from to. And so that idea of having a really clear purpose and saying that's where our eye is. We work on some of the world's most important problems. That keeps people. And then they saw the portfolio changing, and we worked on their skills. Because I also found, for the moment, great, we had great skills, but really we had not great skills for the future. When I left, 8 out of 10 had skills for the future. When we started, it was 2 or 3 out of 10 had skills for the future. So most of my tenure was about all reskilling. And I even, when you say, how do you get it? I mean, for 4 years, we had a class the first Friday of every month, just to role model it. I taught it. I mean, so if you think you got to learn a lot, I mean, I was like, constantly, a book ahead. No, but that constant, but it was just a role model that, look, I'm talking about myself, all of us, right, have to learn something. 4 years, first Friday, every month. Yeah, we taught. And so it was all about, it led me to this world of what I work on now about skills first. I think we all want a world where, hey, I'm hired for my skills, promoted for my skill, paid for my skills.
So if I can boil it down then. If you are in a company, if you were leading a company where your competitors are doing one thing, you're doing something else, investing in values and investing in your people. So you were building up their skills. They leave better
Yes.
than they started.
Yes,
And
and
they
know
feel good
who
about what
you
they do.
are.
And know
I
who you
think
are.
that know that what makes you, you, because it is very enticing to chase the shiny objects around you. Everyone wants you to become something else.
Mhm.
And honestly, I learned a lot of lessons on that. You go too far away from what you are, A, you're horrible at it, and there's no way to leverage what really is your strength. And so I spent a lot of, we got to that. We are the essential guys. We are the mission critical guys. And we're not those other things, and we'll never really be good at them. So put it aside. And I actually led to a lot of divestitures of like kind of the ornaments on the tree that were not the tree. It's a really valuable lesson to not chase somebody else. Be the best you. I had a client once say to me, we're trying to sell. I was calling him, oh, I want you to do it. And he said, Ginny, be the best IBM you could be. And those words will always resonate in my mind.
There's Arnie Sorensen.
It was, and I love Arnie, God rest Arnie Sorensen's soul. And it was a dear friend. And it was so prophetic about, no, Ginny, I trust you for these missions. Be the best IBM you could be. Don't try to be. And he was so right.
We've got great questions coming in. Let me see if we have time to ask a couple of these. Evangeline and Tammy ask, what advice do you have about networking when looking for a job and climbing the corporate ladder?
Well, my best advice on networking is don't think of it as networking. Honest to gosh. My advice on networking is be curious and ask the people you know questions, and you will find yourself as a good networker. Now, what advice about finding a job? Or about how to
you are actually in the company. How do you network within a company?
Help other people. I mean, that's really what we talked about, right?
And a follow up to that, any job interview tips? People are looking around, a lot of layoffs recently. What do you tell people about trying to find a new job?
You know, I always felt about this that, and there'll be times, of course, we all have these times. Do you ever think, of leaving your position or leaving your company? And the most important question I learned to ask was, and ask myself, am I running to something or running from something?
Mm-hmm.
And as you look for a job, I think you have to ask yourself that. And I think now everybody wants to work for a company that, look, all of us don't get to do like our purpose in every minute of the day. That's just not realistic. But in the main is where I'm going to go work, something aligned with what I believe in, right? And I think that's really important today. You work, why do you work at LinkedIn this long?
Same. Values, skills. I love what I do. So
it's those
keeps me here. Yeah.
Heart things that keep you there.
Absolutely. I want to finish with one question, which is, you were at IBM for 30 years. What was the big, you got there at 30 years, right? Was it more than that?
40.
40 years.
Okay. Wow. I know. I look so young. Is that it?
Absolutely.
Is that what you're trying to say? Let me put the words in your mouth.
Thank you for that. Stepping away from something you've done for 40 years cannot be easy, I would assume. No. Have there been any big surprises, any big learnings? Can you describe it?
I say to people, it was in my dreams. It was at IBM. Once you take a role, you probably feel this way about LinkedIn. It never leaves your mind, and it never does now, by the way. I will always love them. I will always be an IBMer. You can tell that. But the book's not about IBM either, by the way. So just to be clear. But what I am doing now, when you say, so what, do you still, I have got such a full docket, but my big thing, it did take 2 years to write the book. But the other thing is I work a lot and co-founded a group called 110 with Ken Chenault. I mentioned Ken Frazier, Charles Phillips, and Kevin Shearer. It's to place 1 million Black employees into the middle class without 4-year degrees. And just in a real short, it's the point is something else I learned over that decade. As we all looked for people with new skills and couldn't find them, there are so many people like my mom who didn't have the formal education, but they got good skills. And this idea to hire people for their skills, not just their degree, skills first. And so what do I work on now? It's a thread that was my life and through IBM, because it led us to re-credential all our jobs to say, write them for skills. And I bet we'll find we over-credentialed half our jobs, and we did. And I think it's true for almost every company. And it opens up such a big talent pool of primarily underrepresented, because in this country, 80% of Black Americans don't have a college degree. 65% of all Americans don't. So, you come from companies that hired only, PhDs, college grads. What I found, there's this great talented pool there. So while IBM will always be in my dreams and always in my thoughts, that thread is now what I'm really working on, is to get more people, better opportunity for more people.
Great. And if anyone is listening to this and wants to learn more about 110, we had Maurice Jones as a guest recently on This Is Working. So feel free to go back into the archives, read all about the 110, what they're trying to do. Really,
but it's a talent strategy for everything.
Yeah. But I guess my question is more, how do you leave? You talked about.
Oh, so I didn't answer your question.
Okay,
go ahead.
It's okay. When your work and life become so intertwined for all of us, and for most of us, when you step away, what is the process for finding a way to be able to make that distance between yourself? Is there anything that you would recommend to people as they are in their second acts or thinking about leaving, as how to make that transition?
Yeah. It took me a long time, Dan. So I don't know, you're way far away from those decisions, but someone gave me good advice. They said, think about it like a bullseye. Now at this part of your life, you've accumulated all this experience. What's in the center? Like, what is it that you want to really leave behind? And can you do something that's that? And of course, one of those rings are like your husband. Like my husband would like me to spend more time with him. I'm failing at that, by the way, right now. But I'm going to get there. And that idea to really think through, because you'll get bombarded with lots of requests. And I really finally said, wait. I've been so dedicated to that topic of skills first. Like, I think I can do something there. And so those making that transition, I think you got to find what sits at the center of your bullseye. It may not be automatic that you find it. It may take some time, but once you get there, it's your new center. Because when you've worked somewhere and put your whole heart into it, it is the center of your working life, right? It's kind of, you got a really good foundation there. You have to find something, and it could be your family, it could be a sport, it could be helping a nonprofit, but there's something that goes there at the center that has to replace, at least for me, it had to replace that feeling of making a contribution to something.
I love that. So find the center now was probably the right
Start
advice.
Thinking about it. I wish I'd thought of it earlier. Yeah. I didn't.
Well, Ginny, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a terrific conversation, and I hope to have you back.
No, thank you for the great questions. I hope it's been helpful.
That's been great. We've released each episode of This Is Working as a podcast. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can get more advice from the world's top leaders like Ginny by subscribing to my newsletter using the link you should see on the screen right there. I'm Dan Roth. Thanks for watching. This Is Working.